IVM.
The Paodcast is an IVM production, and if you enjoy listening to our show, you should definitely check out IVM Likes by the Indusbox Media staff. It's your weekly dose of pop culture recommendations, whether it's books, movies, or TV shows.
You're listening to the Paodcast, presented by the Daily Pao.
This is Pranati.
And Amit.
And we're from the Daily Pao, a Bombay-specific food and culture platform. And this is our weekly podcast, the Paodcast. Now, this episode is an installment of Metro Station in which we talk about local history and news. And today we're going to be interviewing Ritesh Uttamchandani, who is a city-based photographer. So stay tuned for Metro Station.
Long, long ago, not in Bethlehem, but in a place nearby, there was a wonderful birth of a huge show, which I like to call Cyrus Says, a show that encapsulates everything in human history, from the first Homo sapien to the last Homo sapien, who's traversed the entire world and then come back to India. This is a show which tells you everything about everything. If you want to know, avoid Google, come to us. It's called Cyrus Says. Get new episodes every Monday on the IVM Podcast app or wherever you get your podcasts on. You get one banana water free with every podcast. Right. I'll just check that.
Metro Station.
So this episode is an installment of Metro Station in which we talk about city news and history, and we have with us Ritesh Uttamchandani, who is a Bombay photographer. Thanks for being on the show, Ritesh.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm glad to be here.
You know, we've had a couple of Bombay photographers on the show before.
I think you're the first photojournalist we've had.
Yeah.
I mean, technically, maybe Hashim, who also was on the show, is a photojournalist, but he wasn't talking about
his
being a
work as much as he was
Yeah.
talking about this book that he's working on, Irani Chai. We've had Gopal MS, who is a very well-known Bombay photographer
He's
and
also my
Instagrammer.
favorite city chronicler as such.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe you can tell us why.
Why? Because I love the fact that he picks up these very small things and, which are blink and miss, but we take for granted. And also the way he puts them together, like he has like his own little hashtags, which I feel that a lot of photography is, the language that one associates is English, and that's not necessarily fair. But so he merges like Hindi, English, Marathi, and he notices little things which we generally don't, like commoners generally don't.
Right. Yeah. But is this something that you've tried to employ in your own photography?
Obviously.
Sort of seeking out, lesser known parts of the city or features, aspects of the city?
I'm generally a nosy, curious person, so I just employ it to good use and I have certain rules for myself that I try to avoid cliches. So I don't take pictures of Marine Drive, Gateway and all those things. I feel that those are such imposing backdrops. Even if somebody were to take a shit in front of that, it's going to look great. It's going to look beautiful, because the backdrop is... No, I mean...
In a
I
manner
hope you got my
speaking,
point.
Yeah.
So I try to explore the suburbs. I try to explore places.
So what's your favorite place in Bombay to photograph? Favorite neighborhood?
Favorite neighborhood nowadays is my own, which is RA, and places around it, because it's a very cool dynamic. You have these green spaces, you have like these giant towers and your morning mist. It doesn't look like Bombay at all. It looks like, a little village inside a bigger village as such.
Yeah. And RA has been in the news also recently.
So is that something that you've been covering? It's in the news either for leopards or for Metro Car Shed. So what do you photograph in Goregaon?
It's a lot of things. It's like the landscape is obviously stunning, and by stunning I don't mean it's good looking. It's complex. You have like the divide between the classes, between the economic divide is very evident. So I have to handle it very carefully. I don't have to make it blatant. And I photograph the people there. I engage with them a lot. I take pictures and I give it. I just make prints and give it back to them. And general stories, like...
Is that also a way of building a relationship with these people that, if you want to go back to shoot them, they're more accommodating?
It's not just them, it's with a lot of other people also, because I feel that photography is a very selfish act. I'm the person who benefits the most out of taking a photograph of anybody. And that's why I also don't use the word take. I try to use the word make, which is, like a photograph is a collaboration between the photographer and the person who's photographed. And of course, then the third dimension is the viewer and how, that dynamic is different.
Well, how does that work when you're, shooting street scenes, for instance? And, abroad I know they have these policies where if you take anybody's portrait, for instance, you need to get them to sign off.
A model release.
Yeah, but here I don't think that's so much in, practice. So... when you're shooting street scenes and street life, like how do you work with that then?
See, it's also rigor and practice, and a lot of it is eye contact. I mean, people know when you don't mean well. It's the first indicator is your eye contact, and people know that you're harmless. You're just hanging out. Again, that's through eye contact. And I like to walk to a place instead of getting out of a car or something. Even getting out of a car is it's an indicator of a certain class, and if I'm going into a slum or if I'm going to a high rise. So I like to walk to places because that just kind of levels out things. And if somebody doesn't want me to photograph them, I don't push it.
Yeah.
You were saying, before we started recording, you were saying that you're an old school photographer and that you get out every day and you shoot.
Almost every day.
So, what's your routine like? And how do you decide what to shoot every day?
I don't decide anything. I don't have things like, today's a blue theme, so I will only look for blue because that's restrictive in many ways. I just... whatever comes my way, but it's just that I have to be at least half an hour to 45 minutes before light wherever I go. So if I want to shoot at 3 o'clock, I also feel that harsh light is great to shoot. A lot of photographers avoid it. I think harsh light has its own dynamic, which when you make a print, I believe in making prints. It's an expensive affair, so whenever I can, I make prints of my work and preserve them. But I'm generally, like in Gopal's case, sometimes we go together. Going together is not the best thing for a photographer to do because you end up wasting time eating, drinking chai, or you waste more time. Yeah. But it's great to know about areas that he's been through years ago, and he sees this thing has changed, and then he'll tell you about something. And then when he comes to my side, I tell him, okay. So I like exploring the central suburbs more. I like the suburbs.
You took a picture of Wadala, this great picture of these guys filling a water bottle from this pipeline next to this sewer, and it's surrounded by fields.
Yeah.
So how did something like that come about? Were you just in the area and chanced upon it? Or?
Yeah. So a lot of my photographs are made either, one is I go out specifically and I just loiter. Second is that I don't have blinkers on when I am on assignment. So that particular day about the Wadala photograph, I was actually photographing the first women driver fleet that had, I think, Priyadarshini or Veera cabs or one of those. So I wanted a backdrop of that sort, and I asked them, why don't you come here? And because that particular stretch of Wadala offers me a clean backdrop also for a portrait if I need.
Clean in the sense?
Clean as in there's lesser buildings, so I can just use the blue sky as a backdrop for a portrait, right?
Yeah.
And then while I was waiting for them to kind of show up, I saw these guys come in, and I don't know, I've never really had to ask people if I can photo, because my gear is always hanging. It wasn't right now.
So they know.
So they know that, and people are so aware of being photographed now with the selfie.
Yeah.
Right.
And they're bombarded with images. Yeah. So I guess somebody who works very slow like myself is probably a welcome sight for them.
Okay. So Ritesh, now you've been freelancing for a couple of years, but 2 years, yeah. But before that, you worked with a whole bunch of publications. You were with Indian Express and with Hindustan Times and
Yes.
with Open Magazine. How did you become a photographer? Like, how did it start?
I think it began when I was a kid. My sister used to take a lot of photographs of us, and I remember distinctly that when I would wake up from the bed, my father would be sitting, with like window light behind him, and I would see inverted images, Times of India, etc. Whatever he would read, I would see inverted images. And then when I was sent to Dubai when I was, I think, 19 or 20 to straighten out and, start earning for the house, etc. So that's where...
Why Dubai?
Yeah.
Sindhis go to Dubai, no?
What did you do?
Do you know that Amit here went to school in Dubai?
So I had to leave Dubai at 18 because there was no college over there.
Oh, okay.
So I had quite the reverse thing. I was you have to go now to India because you have to study further, and you can't study further here. So.
No, I didn't come from a family of great means. Touch wood, everything is fine now, but I had to do that. And so I used to come home to my apartment for lunch, and one particular day I saw a documentary on David Allen Harvey, who's a magnum photographer, and I was like, man, why am I wasting time selling real estate and ad space and all this nonsense? Forget it, I don't want this. And then I had this moment of doubt for a week or two, and I was like, maybe I should tell, And then I saw a documentary on Reza. I was like, that's it, enough now. I just packed, I came back. I went back to the same college because I was doing correspondence. I finished my degree. And I tried doing a postgrad in journalism from Xavier's, but I couldn't finish. I took up the internship in the middle at Express, and that's it.
Okay. So that was your first experience of photography? Your stint at Express?
I picked up a camera for the first time when I was 23. I'd never owned one. I had no idea how it works. I'm mostly self-taught, but I had a mentor. I have a mentor. He's still around.
Who's your mentor?
My mentor is this one news photographer from the Express. He's no more with the Express, but his name is A. Srinivas. He's a very cool guy, and we often communicate almost daily.
Okay. So was it him? Did he teach you the ropes of photography pretty much?
Actually, he just made my life miserable. He didn't really teach me. So I had taken my mum once to Priyadarshini Park, and I saw this man with this big long lens taking pictures, and I approached him, and he's like, you can speak English, you look like you're okay, why the hell do you want to be a photographer of all things? It's a dog's life. There's no credit, there's no money, and this was the time of film. I said no. So to test me, he would call me at 7 in the morning to Siddhivinayak and show up at 11:30, 12, 1. He would take me around for his assignments, not introduce me to anybody. I never got a single roll of film out of him. And he was like, the most important virtue that you need to cultivate in photography is patience. Especially when you're working with non-staged moments as such. And I think I have infinite amounts of patience on the street.
Tough.
Yeah, it was miserable.
Tough teacher.
I fainted once. I was waiting for him, and I told him I fainted. He was like, yeah. But what did you shoot? Is what he would ask me. When you were waiting for 6 hours, what did you do with that time?
This reminds me of the standard trope in a kung fu film, in which you have this tough master and this pupil who's getting battered.
But funnily enough, the first time I met you was when I was at the Express for a very brief time, and you staged a photograph.
Yeah.
So it was actually, we had to stage this photograph because it was an assignment where it was me and this colleague of mine had to go and pretend to be a married couple.
I have that photograph. You and Sulakshana were there.
Yeah, so we were doing this. The Express has this thing called test drive, where you went and experienced different things. So we had to experience going for marriage counseling. So we pretended to be a couple and made up this fake story. And then Ritesh is like, pretend you're arguing, and we were on the step somewhere. We had to pretend that we were having this massive fight.
Wow, Amit, I can't imagine you acting.
Yeah, well, you'll have to see the photo.
I have it. I can send it to you.
Right. But so what was your most rewarding stint from all the places that you worked at?
See, the rewarding Express, all of them have had their own rewards in a way. Express was like, it was nice, it was short. I learned how to, I would do like 9 assignments a day or 10 assignments a day, depending on, whatever. And then Hindustan Times we were a very small team of 5 photographers, and our collective ego was hurt by a lot of things that people would talk on field, amongst the photographer circuit. And we were like, okay, we're going to teach you a lesson. You wait and watch. Sorry? It's nonsense photographer gossip.
Right.
Like internal photography camps.
Yeah, there are lots of, journalism has these things. You can't avoid them. It's human nature. So in HT was like, I got like a fair amount of awards and recognition and stuff, and that took me to Open, where I learned, because I had time, and I had Manu Joseph, with whom I used to have arguments about photos and everything, and he was like somebody who you can, kind of argue with. So I think all 3 of them have their own space in terms of rewards.
And what would you say has been like the most challenging thing, assignment, not even assignment or anything, sort of challenge that you, when it's come to taking a photograph, what has been like the thing that...
See, I knew what I was getting into, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know what it, I knew that I wasn't like completely... blinded that this is going to be very glamorous and travel, because of the 7 months that I hung out with this guy. I was like, okay, boss, it's going to be miserable. There's going to be less money, but you're constantly going to be witnessing history at different junctures. Maybe in small history, big history, whatever. And that's, I think,
And speaking of history, you recently, on the eve of 26/11, you posted a series of pictures on Instagram of the photos that you had taken
back then
during 26/11. And I mean, those images are just very up close. Like, the policeman who's been shot, for example. I mean, you were right there.
Yeah, I was also scared because
Right.
the guy was delirious after being shot, and if he went on a shooting spree, that was probably the last image I would have taken.
Yeah.
So
26/11, I mean, as a photographer, what does that event mean for you?
it means, see, I'll go back and finish his question that nothing is really, like, I know everything is going to be challenging. So my mind is set that, okay, you throw this kind of stuff at me, I'll either find a way or I'll back off or something of that sort, right? The challenge I feel is for for people back home, because they can't figure out, why must you spend time in such trying circumstances when you can, I feel that the initial jolts that families get, they're more challenging for them instead of, I think.
Okay, then maybe what's been the most memorable photograph you've taken?
I don't really know what's the most memorable photograph, because
There have been so many.
there are actually so many.
Yeah, but I mean, whatever sticks out in your mind, I mean, even if there are a bunch.
See, there is there's this whole trend of taking personal photographs, right, of your family, etc. and everything, and I don't necessarily buy that because of the kind of upbringing I've had. I feel that you can use personal experiences, learn from them, and then identify such situations in other people. Use the world as a canvas instead of, taking the easy way out and photographing your mom or your father or whatever, So also with immediate family, you have an intimacy, you know them. With strangers, I feel there's a little more hard work involved.
Yeah.
So when my father was ill, I think during the 2014 elections, and we used to live in Mahim. So we shifted from Mahim to Goregaon, and lots of things happened. But then, so every weekend we would go and sit next to Hinduja Hospital. He would sit and ponder about his life, and I would play around or whatever. And I was at that place, and I have this, I don't know, it was just a reaction. I took this one photograph on my phone, where you can see it's like a circle. So you see a child who's about to feed some pigeons. In the distance you see two people walking by. In in the foreground there's a crow taking off, and there's like another pigeon and etc. And smack in the middle is a guy who's taking a photograph, probably of me or probably of things behind me or of the sky. So it's just like a mirror of, whatever. And you see the change in the skyline with the sea link there.
Yeah.
There was no sea link when I was a child. There was sea rock.
Right.
So I feel that's a more personal photograph for me, and I would like, if I had to like pick out, these are the kind of images that I would feel close to,
Right.
which also demand a lot from the viewer. It's not just a pretty photograph, and the crow has a significance.
And you took a really great photo of a pigeon recently, mid-flight.
Yeah.
Where did you take that?
That was in Nasik, so I was on assignment for the UN, photographing what they do for AIDS, HIV and stuff. And I got up in the morning, and I'd booked a room through one of these apps, and I obviously got the shittiest one. But there's this massive pigeon nest over there, and this guy would come every day, morning. One particular day, I just got him mid-flight. He looks like, his claws are like out to get you. And
And Ritesh, you're working on a book. And I know you don't want to say too much about it, but
I have
tell
no
us a
problem
little
saying
bit.
too much about it. It's just that if I talk, then it's a little difficult to restrain because I'm so involved with it right now. And
Okay. Well, just tell us briefly, as briefly as you can.
see, it's when I was starting out, I used to save a lot of money and buy like these 3,000 rupee coffee table books. And now when I look back at them, I feel they were a total waste of time and money because there's no real narrative in them. There's no beginning and they're all pretty, So I feel that I want to do I've designed it with the help of a friend, self-designed. Of course, that's not final, but it brings together all these observations that I have. And there's a lot of photographs of suburbs because that is the place, 20 years, 30 years down the line, you look at the suburbs with, the same kind of romance that you must have seen Worli at one point in time.
And also because it's probably changed by then. It's changing at a quicker pace than, South Bombay. So.
Yeah, I mean, just to give perspective, the penetration of radio in our lives took about 50 years. And then another 20 years for TV to penetrate, whereas when it comes to like cell phones, it's about 2 years, 3 years.
Right.
Facebook even faster.
Right.
So this is a book about today, by a photographer from today, for maybe audiences from later also.
Okay.
And it's very observational. I'm not making any grand statements. But yes, I'm looking at greed. I'm looking at friendship. I'm looking at very basic things that affect all of us.
And is it about the city?
It's about the city, but there is no mention of spirit of Bombay and Mumbai dreams and all because they're basically packaging initiatives, and I don't want to pander to that.
Well, it depends if you have a publisher who's going to tell you, okay, we need to call this Spirit of Bombay.
Then I might not go with that publisher.
I'm sure.
I've made. Sorry to sound like I'm being difficult or whatever, but like I've made the arrangements in such a way that if I have to do it on my own, a small print run about maybe like 250 to 300 copies, I've saved up enough to kind of go ahead.
And
with
people can email you if they want a copy of this book, right?
Definitely. Yeah. I had a pre-booking 2 days ago for 50 copies.
Okay.
Which was through, a lot of corporates like to gift things to people. And it was purely based on the concept note and 6 pages of the PDF.
Wow. Okay. And what is your email address? So that people can
my email is my full name at Gmail, or they can also use the Bombay Book at Gmail.
Okay.
Okay.
Very simple.
Super. So we'll watch out for the book.
Thank you.
Any idea when it'll be out?
It was supposed to be out 31st July last year.
Okay.
Okay. Anyway, we'll track your Instagram.
And your Instagram is also your full name?
Yeah, my full name.
Okay, that is
Ritesh Uttamchandani.
RITESHUTTAMCHANDANI.
Okay,
Wow,
super.
you will spend a lot of time in that first 5 minutes of the school exam just writing your name.
Yeah, they used to ask us to write our father's name also, no? So with my father's name, it's really long.
It's another 5 minutes. Anyway, thanks so much for being on the show, Ritesh. We'll be back next week. For updates on city events, you can check out our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter pages. We're the Daily Pow on all three. You can listen to the Paodcast on the IVM website, the IVM app, or your favorite podcasting platform.
एक्सक्यूज मी भैया, एक्सक्यूज मी,
बोलिए मैडम।
मेन्यू में क्या है?
मेन्यू में सीन अनसीन है, पॉडकास्ट है, ऑन कोर्स है, साइरस है, मेड इन इंडिया, रीडिस्कवरी प्रोजेक्ट, एम्पावरिंग सीरीज, सेक्स वैक्स है, IVM लाइक्स है, सिंप्लीफाइड है, कीपिंग इट क्वियर है, थिंग्स एंड डेस्टिनेशंस है, माय नेबर जकरबर्ग है और द फन गराज है। आपको क्या चाहिए?
एक बार रिपीट कर देंगे क्या?
रिपीट नहीं करता हम। आप जाओ IVMpodcast.com पे और सुनो ये सब, या फिर डाउनलोड करो उनका ऐप, सब आपकी उंगलियों पे।